Hello everyone, my name is Nicola, but you can call me Nikki, and this is the rise and fall and sort of rise again of Freud's psychoanalysis. So you've probably heard of this guy by now, or at least I hope you have, so I will try to keep the summary pretty short. Freud was born in 1856 in what is now the modern Czech Republic. He was smart from a very young age, and by 17 he had graduated from high school with honors and was fluent in 8 different languages. He went on to attend medical school at the University of Vienna, and with the influence of his mentor, he ironically developed very materialistic and positivistic beliefs about medicine. However, in later years, he went to study with Jean-Martin Charcot in France and returned to Vienna a pseudoscientist. There, he eventually opened his practice, where he began treating patients and started developing his theories of psychoanalysis. Now let's review some of Freud's most popular theories. We'll start off with the id, ego, and superego, which are the 3 parts of the mind Freud proposes we have. The id represents our biological, unconscious desires, the superego represents our moral compass, and the ego is the rational force that binds them together and keeps them balanced. Freud also endued great importance to dreams, where he claimed that they were the manifestations of the unconscious mind. These manifestations can represent things like repressed emotion. And finally, perhaps his most popular as well as his most controversial theory is about the stages of psychosocial development. I won't cover this super in depth as all of his theories were comprehensively covered in the lecture, but his general idea was that children entered specific stages of development where they fixate on things like oral and anal stimulation, genitalia, etc. And if the child does not get the appropriate amount of stimulation at each stage, they might go on to develop issues related to the stimulation they missed. So for example, a child who did not get enough oral stimulation might struggle with smoking or overeating. The common thread that ties Freud's theories together in a neat little bow is the practice of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysts believe that mental conflict is derived from past, repressed experiences residing in the unconscious that failed to be processed in the conscious mind. In order to treat these mental conflicts, a qualified psychoanalyst must use techniques like dream interpretation or free association to tug at the unconscious memory and allow it to be freely expressed. The practice of psychoanalysis remains controversial. However, some elements of it have persisted into more modern therapies. Now that we've established what psychoanalysis is, let's see how it related to psychology at the time of its emergence. In the early days of psychoanalysis, psychologists had just begun implementing empirical methods of study. The field was becoming increasingly popular, and there was much excitement around all the possibilities of this emerging scientific field. And enter psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysts generally pushed aside psychology and believed themselves to be the true scholars of the mind. The article from this week characterized psychoanalysts as arrogant and self-important and having a, quote, almost frightened zealotry, which I found to be quite interesting, but I digress. By the time psychologists were really starting to grasp the implications of this brand new psychoanalysis, the public was enamored by its ideas and ensured it would not fade away quietly. The idea of being able to extract forbidden information in the form of repressed memory was simply too interesting to ignore. So why did these two fields clash so much? Well, it all comes down to the science, or lack thereof. Moving away from introspection, psychologists at the time strived to cement psychology as a natural science, supported empirically by data and validated by sound methodology. Psychoanalysis was the antithesis of this effort, characterized by a complete lack of empiricism and a careless disregard for methodology. Psychoanalysis, in the psychologist's eyes, was a complete rejection of everything they were working towards. So how did this major conflict end? Well, in short, it never did really. Psychologists initially tried to give constructive criticism of psychoanalysis in an attempt to resolve things, but the cyclical nature of psychoanalysis ensured that it was never taken seriously. Eventually, things escalated, and psychologists began attempting to systematically disprove psychoanalysis by the very same science they were defending. However, this too got out of hand, and pretty soon no one cared about any of the studies, just so long as psychoanalysis was being attacked. Through the rebranding of psychoanalysis buzzwords into behavioral terms and its exclusion from newer textbooks, psychoanalysis was slowly reduced to an acceptable form but was not erased completely. Even today, there are echoes of its legacy bouncing around laboratories and clinical offices everywhere. So why was psychoanalysis so popular? It is no doubt obvious at this point that psychoanalysis was a flawed practice. It was unscientific, subjective, and attempted to reach a part of the mind that could not be reached. Even so, people remain fascinated with Freud and his theories to this day. It's human nature to be subjective, and try as we might, we cannot separate ourselves completely from our thoughts and emotions. I propose that psychoanalysis may not have been as bad as we think. Although it undoubtedly caused a lot of conflict, psychoanalysis questioned psychology. It challenged it and forced it to become better than it was. And just maybe we're better for it.